being creative is when two unrelated things collide and it sort of creates a new thing. So I don't believe in absolute creativity where there's a void and then you create something from that void. I believe as humans, what we're always doing is we're taking things that are existing, putting them together, and creating something new from it. So the trick to staying creative is to make sure you always have two new things to put together. So for creativity, to exercise creativity, you always need to be doing new things, which also means being a bit distracted at times and being perpetually distracted, and bringing new things to your creative process.
Welcome to The Learning Curve by Snap Ark Global. Today I have with me Niruban. He's a finance professional who went into the creative side of things by learning graphic design. And he's now the creative director of Sysco Labs. Niruban, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, Joshan, good to see you.
Thanks for your time today. I know you have like a really interesting story because, like I mentioned in the intro, you started off in finance and then you started learning graphic design and then felt that creativity was where you really were passionate about and took that deep dive into. So could you maybe share a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are?
I actually wanted to do creative stuff after school. Right. So after school, I did maths A-levels, and then I wanted to become an artist, a fine artist, right? So it was a personal moment, and I thought I wanted to be an artist. And then I applied to an art school abroad. And I got admission. I got like the first year waived off, but I didn't have money, right? And I didn't know how the scholarship system works back then, and I didn't have anyone who could sort of help me with that. So I thought to myself, either I become a fine artist or nothing. So someone told me that fine arts is way over here, and then you have interior design, architecture, interior design, and then graphic design all the way at the bottom. So I had the option of pursuing graphic design in a local school or a uni, and I thought it's beneath me. So I thought, let me study something that helps me run an art business. I did not know what that meant, but I thought art business. So I had someone mentor me and said, why don't you try CIMA? So I did CIMA, and then, then I found out that to finish it, you need to work at in a accounting or in a finance environment for 3 years. So then I went to Ernst & Young, and that's how really my professional career started. Right. It was in finance, but I didn't get into finance because I wanted to. It was a long-winded way about getting to where I wanted to, which is the creative space. So I did Ernst & Young. I did 6 years there, but parallel to that, I was also doing my own thing with painting and murals and all that sort of thing. And then finally thought, as I was getting married, I thought I need to do a creative thing full time, and then sort of made my way back into the creative space. So it was where I've always wanted to be, right. But it's just that I had to shift gears professionally, going from finance, accounting, consulting to now in commercial creative, which is different to the arts where it's all about your expression. Here it's different. You're trying to meet a business objective. I went into it by way of graphic design because I was working with painting pictures. So it was a natural extension, and I really liked it. But now I'm in more than multiple spaces in the creative sort of workflows.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you had creativity as something you knew from the start you wanted to get into, and also do as a business. Now your day-to-day looks like creative director at a commercial sort of creative space. How has the transition been coming to the commercial creative?
Right. So in hindsight, I think it served me well that those 6 years of being in a finance or corporate environment. So the reason being is that what I do has changed. So at Ernst & Young, you're doing audits, you're doing consulting, trying to solve a business problem through the tools given there, which is finance and numbers. Right now, what I'm doing, so I'm working for Sysco Labs, which is part of a huge organization, Cisco, US Fortune 500 company, all of that. So the what I do remains the same, which is again to solve a business problem, but the how I do has changed. So now I get to use words, pictures to solve it. But it's also helpful to know and understand how the numbers or the business side of things work in terms of how things get funded and how why someone wants to part with their money, so to speak. It helps to know that, and I think if I didn't have that, now I'm thinking, I'm sure my parents are going to have a laugh about this because they insisted that I stay in accounting, but it helps to know that, because I think if I didn't have that, I don't think I could have been very successful in, or even moderately successful in what I do in a creative role, because creative leader in a big corporate, you really need to know the business side of things and how that works, because you can't then, if not, you're sort of being a dreamer, you're just sort of up in the air thinking, oh well, why can't this film that we're trying to make get funded, what's wrong with it? So you learn to wear a different hat really when you look at. So then I can also tell my team, hey, think of the business side first and then get into the creativity for it. So yeah, I think it helps, and if not for that, I don't think you could do this very well.
So it kind of worked out in your case, having that background and merging it with your creativity. Just to sort of get an inside look into what a creative director does on the daily. What does your work entail? What are the projects kind of that, if you can share?
Sure, yeah. So I wear about 2 hats now at Sysco Labs. So one is creative director in terms of, so we as a marketing team, and I have to lead that team. I also do a little bit of work on corporate strategy side of things because I have that experience and that background. What the day-to-day, so okay, at Sysco Labs we're trying to solve essentially 2 briefs, right? So one is, we want the best tech talent to come and work at Sysco Labs. That's the biggest brief. So there's a bunch of activities that we do, things that we do to make sure that we are attracting the right people. The second is, once they've come into Sysco Labs, we want to make sure that they have the best experience at Sysco Labs. Now, why does marketing do this as opposed to any other function? So we are what's called a matrixed organization. So we don't work in a silo. So I will have internal customers like other departments. And essentially the thinking that my team brings is, okay, if we were to have, say, an event, right? So how is the employee experience around that? What's the most creative way to bring that experience out about? Are we communicating the right things? And a lot of this comes to nuance. So we are really in that space internally. And externally, it's more about communicating this Sysco story. So that's the media function, which is getting on social media and things like that, and then creating the content around it. So your videos, pictures, and all of that.
And do you engage a lot with an international audience as well?
So that's where the second hat that I wear. So on the corporate strategy and sort of the internal marketing sort of work. So there are stakeholders, what we call our onshore counterparts. So Sysco Labs, we work primarily and only for, actually not primarily, we work only for Cisco, which is the parent entity in the US. And our teams here work hand in hand with what we call the onshore team, so people who are in the US. So, and okay, so to set context, this is a company with 70,000 people.
Wow.
Right?
Okay. Did not know that.
Yeah. So when we say we're working, our audience is in the US in one company, it's a lot of people in one company. So we have to make sure that we, again, one is understand how they perceive and how they digest information, but also make sure that we're bringing innovative things to the table in terms of how we communicate with them and engage with them too. So for example, if one of our teams here has created a really cool innovative solution, then we'll figure out how do we communicate that to the rest of the organization.
There is that distinction between communicating. Okay.
Yeah. And then that organization is huge. So it's even though we call it an internal customer, internal audience, it's not small. It's not like we're talking to 100 people.
Yeah.
It's in the thousands.
I also snooped around a little on your LinkedIn because I know you're quite active there. And I noticed you call yourself an imposter syndrome extraordinaire. Could you maybe elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, one thing is I like to have a, I don't know what the correct term is, like a contrarian, not contrarian, like almost like an anarchist view of,
Okay.
of corporate LinkedIn, right? I think sometimes it's just like, because people are not really like that in real life.
yeah.
So it's like it's
Understandable, yeah.
it's an extremely how do I say, it's an extremely condensed version of one part of someone's life on
Right,
LinkedIn, right?
right.
So that my view is, I think you have to be real.
Mm.
Imposter syndrome, etc. Because imposter syndrome is something that I've struggled with for a long time, and I continue to struggle with. And I think I don't think I can ever get out of it, purely because I feel that I am not qualified to do what I'm doing. So a lot of the times in the marketing sort of creative space, because I don't have formal training in it, so especially when I'm even at the agency, or now when I sort of pitch and say things, you know, I'm always wondering, am I just winging it?
Yeah.
Or is there any truth to what I'm saying? Because there's no reason as to why you should believe what I'm saying, because I'm not a qualified marketer, or so I did not have a formal education in design or marketing.
Yeah.
If my role was to do with finance and numbers, then I won't feel that way. But since it's not, I have that sense of imposter syndrome, and I think that's what helps me to also really make sure that I do my best. I'm always afraid that I'll get caught,
Right.
which is something that people with imposter syndrome have. So yeah, it's more to do with not having a qualification.
Yeah. Thanks for keeping it real. Like imposter syndrome actually is, I guess, something everyone goes through at some point. But I understand in your context specifically how it could end up feeling that way. But what are some things that you do to quieten that voice, or like to mitigate that? Like, how do you deal with that tension?
Okay, so I overcompensate for imposter syndromeness by making so let's just say that this is the level for when you're presenting to say when I say customer, it could mean internal, external, it doesn't matter, right? So when I pitch to a stakeholder, if the level bar is here, I try to push it. So whether it's in terms of the quality of the design, or the quality of thought or research that goes, so I try to overcompensate for it there. That's just something I do on the delivery side of things. On my own, so I am always so I learn in, I don't know what the right term for this from an academic point of view, but I learn in tangents, right? So I get to a topic, and then there are tangential sort of areas related to that topic, and I go into that. So I sort of learn things in a not so linear way. So let's just say digital marketing, I don't go very deep. I sort of learn, okay, digital marketing, but here's the thing about digital marketing that's connected to behavioral psychology, and I learn a little bit about that, and then that relates to something else about design and design thinking, and then that goes back to how industrial design is done. So it's sort of a very tangential,
The dots connect.
correct way of learning. So instead of going straight or like this, it's sort of like going about very.
Would you say that's something that people can, I think more along lines of?
Yeah, you should, because
I know here the education system is just routine, this is what you got, but to kind of go tangentially, like how do you?
Yeah, and it's much less to do with educational systems. I think it's more to do with how you as a professional or as a person learn to do the thing that you're able or you need to do.
Right.
Thankfully, I'm in a profession where it's almost expected of you to do that. Yeah. If I was a doctor, I don't know if you could apply that same thinking, but this is more so if you look at someone who's doing marketing, they might say, okay, I need to get my bachelor's and then my master's in marketing, and I need to get CIM qualified, and it's a linear path. Maybe you should get your bachelor's in marketing and get do something else, maybe a short course on behavioral psych, and then do something else on. So I wanted to learn about product design and how people build products, right? But instead of like taking like a UI design tool, and so I picked up carpentry.
Right.
So it was an intense few months in my life. I spent a lot on it. But I tried to make a desk because I was obsessed with desks,
Mhm.
and I really loved the idea of the desk being the operating system for your life. And in my case, it is, because literally everything in my life that's
Right.
work or otherwise happens on a desk. So I think a desk is really important. So I thought I want to build it. So to build a desk, then I learned a lot about carpentry, and I went down like a rabbit hole about carpentry. But in the end, I ended up learning more about how the kind of mindset you need to have to build products. Because when you're building a product, whether it's a desk or other product, you suddenly hit something, then it requires you to sit, take a step back. So is it a problem with the joinery? Is it the problem with the way I cut the wood? Is it the glue? Is Then I learned that okay, wood absorbs moisture, and that like throws a wrench. So it's a very, let's just call it a different way of learning about
Did you
things.
make the desk?
I did. I made the desk. I was so proud of it. It was not what I expected because I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I
That
think
level.
YouTube is the number one source of education for me. I think everything I do right now,
Everything is on YouTube.
Yeah, if I'm making money off of it, I probably would have learned it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think I owe more to YouTube than to
Any
school
formal,
or
yeah.
university. It was a great desk. My brother came to my house. He wanted to fix something. He went down the desk. He got up, and then the desk just broke in
Oh
half.
no.
Yeah, and I learned so much about you should not glue pieces of wood together
Right.
against the grain. But yeah,
Right.
it was a good experience.
Yeah, so practicing is also a great way of like learning the subject. Thanks for that story. So I remember growing up, the first time I heard about Sri Lankan attempting a Guinness World Record was with the work you were doing. So would you
Right.
care like sharing a little bit of a story, how that unfolded, how
Yeah.
it went about?
Yeah. So just to clarify, we did not get the Guinness World
Right.
Record, but so
Attempted.
yeah, we attempted, but it was a super fun experience. So about 10-15 years ago, this was me doing my art thing. I was part of a Christian youth group called Youth for Christ, and then I made a bunch of friends there, guys who are younger than me, and then we created what's called the P413 Mob, which is an art collective. So my artist name was P413, and then the mob followed me, so that was the P413 Mob. And we did a project for Electric Peacock Festival, which was near Golface, where they had the car races and all of that. So it's a long time ago, around 2010, 2012. So for Electric Peacock Festival, Leah, the founder of the festival, who also later ended up becoming my boss, asked us to do a paper mache sculpture. And we were like really young at this time. So we thought, great. And we spent about 2 weeks in a warehouse she owned making a paper mache sculpture. And then the year after that, so that was great. So that was, I think, during December or something like that. And the year after that, we did another self-funded project, which I funded, called Kill Xmas. So we're all a bunch of kids or teenagers. We're trying to learn something new, and we sort of do it and then learn it on the fly, right? So Kill Xmas was great. We did it. And then we were brainstorming for ideas for the next year, and we thought, okay, we need to do something this year. And we thought, why not make the biggest paper mache sculpture? Because that's what we started out with. And that's how we tried to break the Guinness World Record for the biggest paper mache sculpture, which halfway through it, we realized this is a lot more difficult than we anticipated. But the reason we didn't get it is because I did not read the Guinness rules correctly. So it said that you needed to video the whole process of you breaking the record. And we built this, it was basically a huge square or a cube. And we painted the face of a robot under it, called it the paper bot, right? It was built of paper mache sculpture. But it was, so in terms of size, it was fine, but we didn't record the whole process. And it was done over like 5 days, nights,
Mhm.
etc.
Massive team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at one point, on I think there were about 90 like teenagers in there. Like,
Wow, that's a lot of paper.
yeah, a lot of paper. They were bathed in chemifix, and it was just like Attica. There was the Park Street Muse car park, and yeah, and we didn't record it, and that's the reason that we didn't
Consider it, right? But like, what an experience! Like,
yeah,
just the whole
yeah, and
start to finish.
and I learned that as a visual creative, like I had some working knowledge of most areas except anything to do with the camera, and as a result I didn't pay attention to that.
Mm.
And as a result, so I learned that I now need to always work with so I have immense respect for people who have video capabilities. In my team I
Yeah.
have two, and yeah, they are like my prized. Let me not say that. But it's just that I think if you it's that component, at least from my learning, if you miss that,
Mm.
all the other work that you do is just going to like
Yeah. Brings in everything together, right?
correct. Yeah. So I don't want to like say that the other work
Yeah.
that my team does is not important. It is, but video is the thing that sort of makes it real in terms of
Yeah.
letting it live beyond the actual sort of instance.
Yeah. Creativity is clearly something that you grew up with, even that you use till today in your day-to-day job. What do you do to keep that creative side alive?
Right. So I'm of this view that creativity is a muscle. I think I'm not the first person to say it. I think a lot of people have said it's a muscle. You've got to exercise
Does
it.
everyone have this muscle?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe, yeah, I think everyone has it to some
degree.
extent. I think it just comes down to how much you're willing to exercise that muscle.
Mm.
And also, I have also a different view on what creativity is. Maybe I'll
Yeah, do
let you
share. Do
know,
share.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a minute. But what I do to like quote unquote stay creative. So okay, maybe that has to do with what creativity is, right? So to me, being creative is when two unrelated things collide and it sort of creates a new thing. So I don't believe in absolute creativity where there's a void and then you create something from that void, right?
Mhm.
I don't believe as humans we could do it. I believe only like God, who I believe in, can does it. In sense, take something out of the void and create not something out of nothing.
Yeah.
I believe as humans, what we're always doing is we're taking things that are existing, putting them together, and creating something new from it. So the trick to staying creative is to make sure you always have two new things to put together. Now, this is also, I read about it from like a biological point of view. There's this idea or this thing or phenomenon called neuroplasticity. So basically, when you do different tasks or learn new things, different parts of your brain is active. And when you learn to do two different tasks, essentially the strength between the neurons that are responsible for those different things strengthen. That's called neuroplasticity. So hypothetically, if I was being a really good accountant and also being a really good artist, it would have created some neuroplasticity
Because those neurons are firing together.
together, and that would have created something new. So the way to stay creative is to do new things, as opposed to doing the same thing over and over again. So that's where I feel like creativity. So for example, like a debate that me and my colleagues were having was, can you call like an artist who draws the same kinds of picture again and again, can you call that person creative? Or are they really good with their craft? So craft is this thing of how good you are at making something, right? So if you could be an expert jeweler or a clothing designer, and you have craft, and even in advertising there's this thing called craft, is how good that can you make that thing. But all craft is not necessarily creative. So for creativity, to exercise creativity, you always need to be doing new things, which also means being a bit distracted at times and being perpetually distracted, and bringing new things to your creative process. So my newest thing is bringing in productivity tools into my creative workflow. So now I'm hyper obsessed with like
Notion.
no, yeah, it was Notion. Now I'm I'm on ClickUp, which my team
Right.
is on, and then now I'm going to try a new tool. So it's obsessed about how streamlining some of the more boring
Mhm.
tasks in a creative pipeline, and then focusing on the really interesting bits, which gets that part of your brain obsessed. Which is actually okay. I'm on a tangent here.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Which is where I think a lot of the I hate this word. I can't believe I'm saying it, where a lot of the AI related conversations are. So I'm personally a bit excited because I think if you look at a creative process, a standard creative process. So let's say in my world, it's making a poster for a event. In making a poster, I will go through really boring, mundane bits as well as the more interesting bits. So the interesting bits are, figuring out the composition, the style, the tone, where I want to go with it. And then the boring bits could be, okay, I found a photograph that could use in the poster, but I need to spend time masking it out or changing some part of that photograph.
Right.
That's where now I'm thinking, hey, now I don't have to spend as much time because now AI can do it.
Generate. Yeah.
Or just like Adobe's newest tool, which is more about, selectively modifying or masking stuff out, which so normally on Photoshop you'd spend hours like masking tools up, masking things out. Now it's just done super fast. And so I think there are mundane tasks in a creative process
Can be delegated.
that can be delegated to a machine or whatever. And even in larger creative workflows, trying out new things and then incorporating it into your creative workflow is how you be creative. If not, I think you will be very good at something, but I don't know if you can call it being creative,
Right.
especially in a commercial sense. In fine arts, and it could mean a different thing altogether.
This is a question I ask guests in general. What's something that a mentor taught you, or something that you picked up maybe from a family member that you still carry with you today and that shapes who you are?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I've made a list, not a list, but so apart from like personal mentors who sort of guided me, that's more personal. But from a work point of view, my first boss at Ernst & Young, I'd still weirdly think of him as my only like boss because it was a very vertical relationship. It was like, I have nothing to offer. Here's someone very senior in the industry willing to take a chance on me and just help me just grow. So it was a very vertical relationship. Not from like he wasn't bossing over me, but it's just that I recognized that I came in with zero and he's already 25 years in the industry. So it's very different. And I had nothing to bring to the table. He taught me a lot of things, but I think the one thing that I will never forget is that he told, because I was terrible at answering client calls, right? I was like
First
more
job,
creative,
right? So,
and I was like, I don't want to deal with annoying clients. I didn't want to do that. And then, I skipped a client's call. Eventually, my boss got to know because she called my boss and he said, Niruban, one of these days, first he said, I feel like picking you up and punching you. But since he's like a short person, like since I physically can't do that, I will tell you this. It's, one day your client is going to call you at 3 a.m. and say that their son is sick and, help him out, take the son to the hospital. You better pick up the phone when that happens and you better do that for your client. And that thing stuck with me for like life and I knew that he was saying something smart and right because he has fantastic client relationships. Like his clients have been with him for decades,
right,
and they will not leave him. And that's why he runs a successful business. It's purely built on relationships with his clients. And I don't want to mention names, but these are like really big companies, big finance directors, CFOs, direct CEOs of companies, and he has fantastic relationship with him that is beyond price and project and like all that stuff is sort of there, but
secondary.
But he has great relations. So I will never forget that. So that's my first boss, Ms. Asri Gunasekara. So then the second sort of learning is from my next boss, Peter, again. So I went from Ernst & Young to Peter's company, and Peter was a true contrarian. I think so. What I've learned is that it's hard to put into words, but it's sort of this idea that don't accept something at face value. So he's the kind of person who is willing to challenge everything, question anything. And yeah, I think it could be summarized in this thing. This where he says talks about fear and shame, right? So I think it's a quote that he referred from someone or some other famous author, whatever says it. He says, if you want to change the world, you just need to get rid of two things. That's fear and shame. And more often than not, fear and shame comes in the form of when you ask questions. Because in Sri Lanka, we have this culture of when you ask questions, you're made fun of, you're panditya, just sit down, don't ask questions.
You're afraid of also looking stupid.
Exactly. You're afraid of looking stupid, and you're afraid of not being that sore thumb that's sticking out. And if you can just get through that and just ask questions, I think it's going to open up a lot. And ask questions not just from someone who's talking to you, but ask questions when question everything, rather. When someone tells you, hey, this is the way things should be done, you should be question, why should it be? So it's a real contrarian way of looking at the world and life in general. And I think those are the two biggest. So after I exited Peter's company, it's it's not so I learned a lot of things, but it wasn't sort of big lessons as such. So I think these two lessons sort of stick with me.
They're fantastic, honestly.
For the rest of my life.
Just to summarize, invest in great relationships, and if you want to change the world, get rid of fear and shame. So those watching at home, hope you can pick up on that, and I think that's something we can all incorporate into our own lifestyles and on our own learning journeys. To wrap the conversation up, I'd like to ask you if there's one thing you'd like to share with the audience watching. What would that be?
Wow, I feel so important.
Put you on the spot.
It's a personal motto, and that's to zig when everyone else zags.
Could you share a little bit about what that means?
Again, it's there's this cartoon. It's called Fred Siebert. I read about his thing a long time ago. He's a person who had a long career at Cartoon Network, right? And so he started off as something. He ended up as a producer. And he said to have a long career, you need to zig when everyone else zags. So what he's saying is that when everyone else is going through a very linear progression, you need to be able to zig or zag through those opportunities. And it's an idea that's now becoming popular. People are saying you don't just move vertically, but you also move in your career laterally as well. So like I did, finance to marketing, now maybe marketing to something else. So it's sort of lateral moves as well, as much as you're making vertical moves. So don't be hyper focused on just starting off as junior marketing executive and ending up as CMO. Maybe you need to think of your career as, maybe junior marketing executive, moving to finance, moving to supply chain, moving to something else. And then, so it's zigging when everyone else zags.
Thank you so much, Niruban. Today has been quite an insightful conversation into the world of creativity. We're really grateful you could join us on the learning curve. Thanks to all who joined us as well watching this episode. We just want to wish you all a great week ahead. Thanks to Niruban once again.
Thanks, Raja. Thanks.